HIBM. If you don't know what that is, it's hereditary inclusion body myopathy, and what happens is over time your muscles start to not work the way that they should. And I want to start our conversation today with Michelle Etabar, who is just such an incredible warrior mama. 10 years ago, you found out that you had HIBM, and I know the journey has been extremely challenging for you. And I just want you to share with us what's been going on, how has it affected your life and your body? And I just feel like so grateful that you're here with us and that you're so willing to talk when most people really don't want to talk about it. It's a difficult subject.
Thank you, Shireen. I'm glad that you're having us on today. I appreciate it, and I think it's important that we talk about the things that we're all going to talk about today. The first thing I want to say is that my experience with HIBM, or as it's now known as GNE myopathy as well, is my story. It doesn't affect everybody exactly the same. What initially happened was, after I had given birth to my daughter, I noticed that my hips didn't feel right, and I had sciatica, and every doctor that I went to said, oh, you're petite, it's childbirth did this, here's some physical therapy, you're fine, you're fine. And I had to go to countless specialists, MRIs, etc., because I knew something isn't right. And I was tripping as well, but it wasn't enough to think something is desperately wrong. And when I finally got to the right doctor who gave me my diagnosis, and he gave me that diagnosis probably within 20 to 30 minutes, by doing a series of nerve tests and asking me some questions. And he said, you have this debilitating muscle disorder, and you're going to be in a wheelchair in 10 to 15 years, and you shouldn't get pregnant again, and you shouldn't, and this and this and this. And it was just, and when you get news like that, it's devastating. But when I went home and I Googled HIBM myself, and one of the things on there was weak index fingers, and you think to yourself, how does that present in real life? I couldn't spray hairspray anymore. And I didn't use hairspray that much, but something as mundane as that. And I realized, oh my God, I kept thinking the hairspray stuck, but that's it. And it doesn't start off as something, you know, so big and so strong. And primarily people think of this as something affecting the lower body, but it's everywhere. It's in my arms, it's in my hands, my fingers, my neck. And I've gone through a journey that primarily is a lot about loss. And you know, we live in a world today of self-help and focus on what you can do, and that's what I do. I do focus on what I can do, but for the purposes of today, I feel like it's important to say, you know, I went from having a slight limp to not being able to run after my then toddler, to the blessing and heartache of using a surrogate to have my next child, not being able to do all the things I wanted to with that child. And you know you understand this because you're a mom of 4. So much of our identity is wrapped up in being a mom. But I'm also a wife. I'm also a sister, a daughter, a friend, and I'm not able to do all of the things that I want to do for my loved ones around me. And I think every so often, I have to learn how to live my life again. A big part of this is the mental part of it also, because there's a lot of anxiety involved. Now, what is anxiety? It's unease about an uncertain outcome. What's going to happen to me in 6 months, a year, 5 years? And it's managing those things. I think that is one of the biggest hurdles here. But I have a very, very good support system in my family and friends.
You are just such like a beacon of hope, because looking at you from the outside, Nobody would know all the struggles you have, maybe when you're walking because you have a walker, but otherwise you just hold it together. And yeah, being a mother and having a disability must be heart-wrenching. And that's why we're here today. We're here because we're hoping that we can find a cure and that we can hopefully see you doing all the things that you want to do with your children.
Absolutely.
You're just incredible. You really are a warrior, Mama. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And we have your brother here with us today, Alex Monsef. You are a great support for your sister, and you're just a rock star in your own right. Your bios, all of you, were just so tremendous. I can't share it all because it would take forever to talk about all of your accolades, but you are a lawyer who started a venture capital and private equity firm that focuses on biotechnology, agriculture technology, and renewables investing, which is how you kind of came to Solve GNE, which we're going to get to in a bit. But what I really want to talk to you about right now is why you're so invested to raise awareness about HIBM, obviously, because your sister is, but you've really dedicated a lot of time and energy to this.
Yeah, so I think there's three primary reasons why. I mean, the first one and number one is because of my sister. I love her very much and I want to see a cure for this be developed. The second reason is, you know, when I started my career, the first 5 years I was doing it, it had actually nothing to do with biotechnology. And I eventually transitioned into it doing agreements for companies, performing due diligence, making investments. And I thought it was kind of serendipitous that I somehow ended up in this field that could help my sister. And then we were trying to figure out kind of what to do. And because I had certain basic skills and understandings of the sector and the environment, I was pretty helpful when trying to get things set up, whenever we were trying to make the agreements with the groups that we're working with now. And I just felt that I could actually make a difference along with Seth and all the other families that are behind this. So that's kind of the second reason. And then the third reason, which may be just as important as the other two, is I think this is a very solvable problem. When I work on it every day, I don't feel like my effort or my time or my money is kind of going into a black hole. I really feel like this is within reach, and that if we work hard enough and get the community to rally around this effort, that we're going to be able to solve the problem. And when you have that belief and you feel that something's so close, it's kind of not so hard working on it. You just wake up and kind of want to do it because you think it's right there and you just want to grab it. So that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of the main reasons why, you know, it hasn't been so difficult working on this, even though the thing in general is a difficult thing to deal with. It's kind of something I look forward to working on all the time.
You see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. And I know Michelle so appreciates you and all that you're doing, which is incredible. Well, all of you, the three of you gentlemen, really have dedicated a big chunk of your time and your careers into finding a cure. And you've created Solve GNE. So I want to talk a little bit to Mr. Sashar today, Dr. Sashar, about Solve GNE. I want to know what you're doing, what this is. Gosh, I wish I could like give the whole bio because you are just such an incredible, I feel so stupid sitting amongst all of you, honestly. It's incredible, but we, again, don't have all the time. But I want to know what makes Solve GNE different from others that have tried in the past, because we do know, those of us who are in the Iranian community, that there have been a lot of different, you know, groups that have tried before. So I want to know why this is different. And I want people to understand why you are the right person to be doing this. So Dr. Sashar, who spent nearly 30 years as a scientist, executive, and consultant in the pharmaceutical industry, is now in this space and is doing this all pro bono, which is incredible. So tell us why, and tell us why Solve GNE is different.
You know, the development of a drug is such a complex endeavor. It takes years, it takes a lot of money, it takes multiple teams of different expertise to be able to come together and put something into the clinic in order to be able to move it through and get it to market. Most people probably don't know this. You know, the chances of success for something from that comes up in a lab and ends up on the market is less than 1%. So, you know, you can imagine, you know, you have to put 100 drugs through the clinic in order to get one that works. And before you can get those hundreds into the clinic, you know, there are thousands before it that fail before they even get to the clinic, right? And so this tells you the complexity that's involved in this business. And it's made even more complicated because you have a regulation authority, right, the FDA, that sits on top of all of this. That's incredibly bureaucratic. There are lots of rules, there are lots of pitfalls, and things can go wrong at any minute. So you need someone who has a lot of experience in this field. And even for somebody like me who's been in the field for so many years of my life, and I've been successful in putting a drug on the market with my own company, I can tell you I have problems sometimes figuring out what the issues are. You have to bring in other experts to help you, lawyers, X, Y, Z. So what I saw was a lot of good people who were spending a lot of their time and energy, and a lot of people from the community who were being very generous and giving their money. But I didn't see a clear direction. There was no strategy. There was no clear drug development strategy that I saw, at least, when I was asked to come and help to put this together. So the most critical thing for me was, hey, we need to put a strategy together. And that was why I decided to get involved. Besides the fact that I have family members who are also suffering from this debilitating disease, unfortunately.
Right, so you're also personally invested.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, right. So, Dr. Sachar, I was speaking with my husband about this, which is why I'm here, because he's involved in this as well. And he was explaining that in doing all of this research, you could possibly find cures to a lot of other debilitating diseases. So it's not just HIBM. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's quite accurate. So the platform that is being used, actually, what we're doing is we're pushing multiple platforms forward, right? Because we're trying to stack the deck. Again, like I told you, it's a statistical game. So you want to be able to take as many shots on goal as possible in order to improve your chances of success.
Right.
And so what we're doing is we're approaching this from 4 different directions, not just one. And each one of those brings in a different platform to the table. For example, we have one that is using a liposomal injection of a gene therapy, which is based on the COVID vaccine kind of formulation, not the COVID vaccine itself, but the technology that goes into making the COVID vaccine, which has been proven to be fairly safe with hundreds of millions of people taking it. And that approach has already actually been used in a patient about 12 years ago, in an HIBM patient. And that patient is still alive. She was unable to sleep on her back at the time before she got the injections. She was having problems breathing because her diaphragm was starting to fail. And she was worried that she was going to lose the use of her right forearm, which she was using to move her wheelchair around. And so luckily, the gentleman the doctor who at the time was working with her, was able to get an emergency use IND application. And that allowed them to quickly get something formulated and inject her forearm multiple times. And after that, when they saw that there were no side effects, the FDA allowed them to go intravenous. So she was systemically subjected to this gene therapy. This went on for about a year. And the patient at that point decided that it was hard for her to travel because she had to go from one state to another, and she had other medical issues that were making it problematic for her to travel. And so she stopped. And we had a chance to talk to her about 3 months ago. And she's alive, she's doing well. Her forearm is still working. She was worried that she may lose complete use of that arm, but she hasn't. She's now able to sleep on her back. Wow. And she doesn't need a ventilator to breathe, which means that there's something there, right? So that was the first beacon of hope that we had. And now with better formulations and with better constructs, meaning gene constructions that weren't available 12 years ago, we're hoping that that group is going to allow us to get even a better therapy into the clinic. We have another group that's developed a robust type of gene therapy that involves what they call bicistronic gene therapy. That involves the injection of 2 separate genes, not just one. So one gene to replace the defective gene and to get the enzyme working to the way it was, and an additional gene to allow muscle growth to take place. So in patients who've had muscle atrophy, they can hopefully get their muscle back and get their lives back. So that's another approach that we're using. And of course, this approach applies to a lot of different diseases, not just HIBM. Similarly with the liposomal injection. We have other groups we have another research team at Johns Hopkins that is bringing on a very surgical type of CRISPR approach. They're doing what's called gene editing, which is going in and fixing a typo directly on the patient's DNA This is something that wasn't around even 5 years ago, and so it's very, very cutting edge. I know the team that developed it at Harvard, the head researcher there, David Liu, was a colleague of mine back from the days at Harvard. So he's been, he's a genius, and he's been able to come up with this new pathway. And so one of his disciples, who's now at Johns Hopkins, is working with us on this. And we have another esteemed team of researchers at Stanford who are also bringing their expertise in gene therapy, because they've already gotten a gene therapy on the market. And so they're now applying their neuromuscular knowledges to HIBM, having developed a full novel way of using the MRI machine to sort of go through and look at the different compositions of muscles and fat tissue in patients, which is extremely important for our clinical development. Bringing on board a new type of viral delivery mechanism, which is much less immunogenic, meaning it won't cause bad side effects in patients, right? So these are some of the things that are happening.
Wow, I'm blown away. I mean,
And I think one more thing I want to mention about all these initiatives, we have contractual arrangements with each one of these groups. We've placed a deposit with them, so the contracts are live, validated, and as soon as we give them the funding to move forward, they will start. And then there's exhibits in all of these agreements that say, this is how long it's going to take to reach each milestone, this is how much it's going to cost, and it goes through in great detail each one of those things. So to Sep's point earlier, because he's been involved and he understands how these things work, we've been able to include those milestones, we've been able to budget it, we've been able to negotiate down the value of what these would have been had someone like him not known the usual tricks or things you might say to these people to try to get a little reduction in price. So these things are set, they're ready to go, and there's a contractual obligation. This isn't just, hey, here, please help us, we're really asking nicely. It's a true arrangement between two parties that have obligations and duties to fulfill.
I mean, it sounds like Solve GNE is on their way to really making some change. I mean, it sounds like you've got the smartest and brightest scientists in your back pocket working and trying to find a cure. I mean, it sounds really hopeful. I'm getting excited hearing about this, and it's incredible to think that a woman couldn't use her forearm, and she's now years later and didn't even finish the treatment and feeling okay, and she's alive, and she's not on a ventilator.
Let me correct that. She had use of her forearm. She was worried that she was going to lose the use of her forearm. So those injections prevented atrophy in her forearm. So let's be clear about that.
Well, I like that. I love, Dr. Sarshar always will make it real, and I love that, and you're always very transparent and very honest, and that's very important when you're running a nonprofit to try and find a cure, so we really much appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother side that's not scientific that talks about, especially in our community, in the Iranian community, Japanese community, the smaller communities, we kind of try and brush an HIBM diagnosis under the carpet. It's hard for us in the community to deal with. And we have Dr. Hemant Sarshar, who is a psychotherapist and worked for many years as a therapist in New York. Can you please talk to this? Because I think this is so important for everyone watching about how we really can support one another in the community, and how, if you are diagnosed, what is that you can be doing to kind of help yourself?
You're absolutely right. There is, we come from a culture, and this is something we actually share on some level with the Japanese, where there's a very clear idea of an inside and an outside, and a private and a public. And in our community, and based on our value systems and how we socialize, these two arenas very seldom overlap. So there's a very overwhelming sense of social honor and integrity that forces the members of our community to keep their private affairs very private, and often live in the outside world, live among their social peers, with many aspects of their lives untold. Unfortunately, the issue of the struggles of living with HIBM have entered this dynamic, and a lot of families are at the very beginning very ashamed of what's going on, and they have a lot of otherwise unfounded concerns around what would happen if the truth about their condition and the challenges that they live with come out. As much as one could sympathize with those concerns, what people tend to overlook is the reality of the emotional burden of having not just the family, but the person who is living with the challenges of HIBM to now, on top of everything else, have to keep secret something that is actually rather difficult to keep a secret. So, and the tremendous emotional burden on someone, usually with the onset of their understanding of their diagnosis, really complicates tremendously the challenge that they have ahead of how are they going to, not just how are they going to manage, as we heard earlier, the complications of the challenges that are coming their way, but how are they going to be able to live in society and keep what certain members of the family may feel is shameful or unpleasant a secret, even as they try to continue to move forward with this condition in society. And it's a truly unnecessary burden for these families and these individuals to have to live with, because it's a genetic condition. It makes as much sense to me to be ashamed of the fact that you're born with blue eyes or brown eyes and try to hide those because you live in a society that feels that blue eyes are not a good thing to have. I mean, I don't know how to go about even thinking about it, but I certainly look forward to it, and I in my own life have tried as much as I can to help families and people to really battle the sense of the stigma that comes with this diagnosis, and really to live openly about it. I think the more people come out about their condition and their challenges, the easier it will be for others. And if it ever before in history, I really think this is the time to do it, because with Solve GNE, we really actually do have very, very legitimate shots on goal. And the more awareness we raise, because also the other factor is that it's not, while we wait for these cures to come through, the other factor that people have to realize is that very simple genetic tests can prevent future developments of this condition. A young couple who are about to get married, all they have to do is get tested, and as long as they're not both carriers of the gene, then this is never going to be an issue for their children and for going forward. And if they do, there's different ways to go about it with IVF, with other situations, to make sure that the embryo that you end up transplanting is not a carrier of the gene. So it's not really, in this day and age, with the science that we have, it's not a very complicated thing to deal with. So the more awareness we have, the more people feel comfortable in being out in society about their condition, I think it will help the entire general journey that we're all going through to get to that end goal, which I really believe is closer than it's ever been in history.
That is such great advice. I think that is probably the best thing we're hearing today for everyone to understand that it's okay. Like, why are we keeping this a secret? And to get tested. I think what you brought up is really important. And I wanted to talk to Alex for a minute about this, and Michelle, if you want to chime in as well. So my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, has HIBM as well. And so as soon as the news came out, I ran and I got tested because I was told that if I was a carrier, Payman most likely is a carrier, then we need to worry about our children. And so I was negative, and Payman said, you know what, I'm not even going to get tested. I don't need to know. My body's okay right now. Because at the time, it was the fear. We all had so much fear. No one knew anything about this, and no one knew anything about it. And I'm looking at both of you, same situation, right? So you're showing signs of HIBM, and
Correct.
Alex is not. Can you speak to that and kind of how it works, where people could get tested, and how it is that one sibling can have it and the other cannot?
Yeah, sure. So the most common scenario you're going to be in is where there's a husband and wife. Neither of them have HIBM or GNE myopathy, but each of them is a carrier. And then when they go to have children, I'll lay out the percentages. The way to do it at first is just to go through what could happen to each kid. So a certain combination will result in a kid not being a carrier and not having HIBM or GNE. The next kid 2 and 3 can be a carrier, basically depending on the combination. And then the 4th kid can have HIBM or GNE. So basically there's a 25% chance that the kid will have GNE or HIBM, and there's a 75% chance that they'll be a carrier, because you have the 2 kids that are the carrier and then the person with HIBM or GNE is also a carrier. So those are kind of the odds, and that's kind of what happened with my family in a way. You know, Michelle was the 25%, and me and my brother are in the other, you know, portion of that table. So
Right.
it's kind of what happened. And then in terms of testing, you know, you can kind of go to, when people are getting married or you meet someone, you can kind of, I know Cedars and Sinai's have a genetic testing panel which has more than just HIBM that you can do. I think that's really important. The reason why I still think what we're doing is super important and why a cure is necessary is because it's been 15, 20 years that we've been trying to get people to get tested in this way, and people are still falling through the cracks. And I'd really love to have a solution for those people that are just gonna fall through the cracks. And Seth brought up the CRISPR or the prime editing way of things. You know, if that's successful, it's also gonna be something that you can just do before there's symptoms that you can just take, and it'll help as well. So, you know, it's kind of like, it's an odd analogy, but it's almost like dieting. You tell people to diet, you know it's good for them, it'll help them live longer. They just don't do it for whatever reason. And I hope everyone does that listens to this, but because just the probability is likely that, you know, this stigma may stick around, we need these other things so that we can just nip it in the bud, you know, and
Right.
totally eradicate it.
So you're saying before you get married, you can just go to any hospital really and do genetic testing, and HIBM is one of the panels, so
Well,
that.
yeah, I would specifically ask for the HIBM panel because there's a Jewish Ashkenazi panel that covers something like 150 to 200 potential issues that someone could have, and I think you have to ask for HIBM separately, actually.
You do. A lot of doctors, especially if they're not familiar with the Persian Jewish community or the Japanese and Indian communities that HIBM is showing up in, they just don't know about it. I remember, when I was diagnosed, my daughter was 1.5 years old, and you can imagine the anxiety and the fear and all of the emotions that went through me. And I went back to my OB because I remembered that Ashkenazi panel. Well, I don't even know if it's called that, but it was the Jewish panel. It looks at Tay-Sachs, et cetera. And I said, "Did you test for this?" And she said, "No, we didn't do it then." And I said, "Well, what about now?" And she's like, "Well, it's a specialized thing. You have to do it separately." And I remember when I had called my general practitioner, because I had gone to her initially when I was feeling discomfort in my hip and what's going on. And I said, "Oh, this is what I have. This is my diagnosis." And she said, "Excuse me, what?" She didn't know. And so for me, it's a very simple test that people can do. Obviously, I am personally invested in finding a cure. And I think that when people see me, they look at it as maybe just, she has a hard time walking. There's so many other things that are going on. I can't put my hair up in a ponytail anymore. Like something as simple as that, or peel an apple for my kid because my hands and fingers don't have the dexterity that they used to. And like I mentioned before, I choose not to focus on the negative things, but this is a matter of life and death. Like this is shortening my lifespan. And to piggyback on talking about, you know, when we find gene therapy or something else, whatever it may be, to help this, I really feel like the way science and medicine, when it's collaborative rather than competitive, when we might discover something that helps something completely unrelated. It's, you know, we had Alexander Fleming, he discovered penicillin, and that was, you know, okay, strep throat, we can figure it out. But it made surgery safer. There was less infections, and therefore more lives were saved with two seemingly unrelated things. And so that part to me is, I couldn't be here advocating just for myself. I'm here for other HIBM patients and other people who have rare and orphan diseases.
Wow. There's something else that I think people talk about in our community that they don't understand, and I would love to open that up as well, is that, so you have HIV/M, your husband does not, and so do your children then 100% not have it? Do they still have to be tested because they could be carriers?
So in our particular situation, Bob went and got tested right away, and he's not a carrier at all. So that means both my children are completely fine. Now, if Bob had been there, then we would have to get the kids tested. I think, I wish I had a pen and paper to take everybody back to biology class and draw what was called the Punnett square. And you have letters and to show the percentages that my brother spoke about earlier, to make it really clear exactly how it works. Because I do think that part of the issue with this is ignorance about how, when people hear genetic, they think, there's other diseases out there that are hereditary, but they don't have the gene to test for it. This isn't like that. It is very black and white as to whether somebody is not a carrier, is a carrier, or actually has the disease. So that's something very important that I think people should know.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
So maybe I can add
Yes,
on to
please do.
what Michelle was saying.
Sure.
If people are interested, they can go on our website
Yeah.
at solvegenie.org, and we've posted a very simplified schematic that shows how the gene is transferred between carriers and non-carriers and what the percentages and the outcomes are. It's very simple. It's one slide, and they can look at it, and it'll be very obvious.
Yeah, it's a great slide, and it's for, kindergartner could look at it and understand it, and it's in layman terms, so
Yeah,
appreciate you
anyone.
putting that up there, yeah.
Anyone, yeah.
What's the website again?
solvegenie.org, O-R-G.
Great. So now that we understand the science behind it, and we understand, the mental part of it and what it does to your body physically, it's kind of like, where do we go from here, right? Where do we go from here? Sorry, I got a little wrapped up there. I thought I was just gonna. Sorry, you can't hear me there. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at you, and you're so beautiful, and I know how much pain you're going through, and everyone needs to know, because you're right. When you're walking around, you look like this beautiful woman who just needs a walker, and everything else is okay, but everything else isn't okay. And that's why we're so grateful to Solve GNE, and that's why the work you're doing is so important. And I want to know what it is that we can be doing as a community to support that work, and what the next steps are.
I can answer that question. Our community can help us to meet our fundraising goals, to be able to complete these contracts so that we can move forward. Some of the shots that we have on goal have the potential to provide a result in 12 to 18 months. But before we can pull the trigger on the beginning, to start the clock on that 12 to 18 months, we need to raise the funds we need in order to be able to set those contracts going. We have a nationwide effort between Los Angeles, New York, and other communities that currently have a good number of Iranian Jews in them, to try to raise this money, and we've been very successful. We have so far raised $2.5 million, and we look forward to being able to raise the balance quickly, especially because the fact is that even though we as Iranian Jews are talking about this and the impact it has on our community, the fact is that this is not a condition that is exclusive to the Jewish Iranian community. It has been found in Europe, it has been found in Japan, it has been found in India, and the work that we're doing, will hopefully be able to bear results quickly so that all of these communities can benefit from it.
I mean, if you look at it, look at all of us sitting here. We all either know someone or who have someone in our close knit who is, has this problem. And, each one of us, I mean, I think if you have a lot of followers or viewers who are in the Iranian Persian community, they probably know us, and we know almost, the remainder of the community. So for them to see that there's four families here who have someone in the family who has this disease, right? It should raise an alarm that, this is not so uncommon, unfortunately, in our community. right? This is something that we have. There are a lot of people who suffer from this. We can put an end to it, right? This is not science fiction. It's not hocus pocus. You know, a disease. So let me give you an example. There's another muscular dystrophy type of disease called Duchenne. A lot of people have heard of Duchenne. You know, Duchenne strikes very young children, mainly boys, and it comes in right around when they're 5 or 6 years old. And these kids don't survive past, you know, their teenage years, unfortunately. A month and a half ago, the FDA approved the gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy that, you know, they are now supposed to give to children who are 5 years or younger. The same viral strain, the delivery mechanism that was used in that therapy is being used by one of our research teams to put the bicistronic gene into patients. That's one of the projects that is ready to go, that just needs funding to get it up and running. That project was developed by a researcher by the name of Paul Martin, who works at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio. Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio is a hotbed for gene therapy. 3 of the, you know, handful of gene therapies that are currently on the market came out of Nationwide Children's Hospital. So there's a lot of expertise there. Paul Martin himself worked on a number of these other gene therapies that are on the market right now. So when I say we have a really good shot on goal with that effort, I can tell you that that's true. On the other side, you know, we have the team that injected a single patient 15 years ago. I mean, that's a reality. That's already been in man. So this is, again, not science fiction, but yet now today, we have much more advanced technology that dwarfs what was done 12 years ago. And so, again, increasing our chances of success. So just, you know, standing on Huan's shoulders and, you know, trying to yell a little bit louder here, it is really important that we get funded and that we can push this forward. And I know in our community, you know, because our budget to do this is not that high. I mean, I can go ahead and tell you, it's a ballpark between $10 and $20 million. And in between all the individuals in our community, that's nothing. Really, you know, I mean, we can do this with our eyes closed. It doesn't hurt anybody. A lot of us can help. A lot of us are helping. And we would appreciate it if others would join us.
Now, when you talk about fundraising, I just want to know, I mean, there's so many great nonprofits out there, right? And all of us do what we can and give what we can. Anyone making any money over here? What's going on? Can you tell us the structure of your
Alex,
nonprofit?
why don't
Alex
you-
is running the show here. Tell us, tell us about the legality of all of it. How does it work?
Yeah, so we set up a nonprofit organization. It's a 501c3, so all the money that people donate, they can write off as a tax deduction. So that's one thing that I want people to know. Your donation can help you in that way. Additionally, nobody that's working with Solve G&E or affiliated with Solve G&E is taking a salary. There's no lease, there's no office space or any other overhead that's taken. The only expense we had is to keep our existence as a nonprofit. So we need to pay to be a 501c3. Every other dollar that people donate goes directly to funding these gene therapy efforts, and no one else touches a dime. Additionally, we're working with an organization that oversees the funds. Each time Sep and I want to fund a research agreement or send money out or move it in any way, they review what we're doing. They need to see the agreement. They need to see that it's an actual donation that goes towards gene therapy, and then they need to approve the wire. So we're in a sense audited before we do anything. It is the most clean operation in terms of getting funds out and have none of it wasted before getting to its final destination that a nonprofit can be.
That's incredible. That's really unheard of. So every dollar that's given is really pretty much gone straight into finding a cure for HIV. It's incredible.
This is correct. And there's another level that I think it's important to mention here. The three of us who are sitting here are all also businessmen. And from the psychological perspective of the businessmen in our community, I know that they would love to hear what I'm about to tell them, which is we are in fact piggybacking on hundreds of millions of dollars of medical research that has already happened and proven to be effective. Because of the work that has been done before us, we have the advantage of being able to run literally the last mile of a many 100,000-mile race that those companies before us have already ran, and they've already proven the concept of the work that they're trying to do. And because of the similarities in the approaches, we really will be able to benefit from all of the work that has happened. But rather than spending $200, $300, $400, $500 million to go through this medical research, we just jump in at the last mile with the $10 to $20 million budget that we have allocated to this to be able to achieve the same results. And truly, no matter how you look at it, in terms of science research, in terms of medical research, in terms of a business investment, in terms of the dollar value you get for every dollar that you invest in this research project, we are basically blowing it out of the park. You know, you couldn't get through the end of this path any more efficiently than the way we are doing it. And it's really thanks to the work that they've done. SEP's been able to bring all of these people together. All of these scientists have all agreed to share their knowledge with each other. I mean, we really are standing at an unprecedented crossroads in finding the solution for this debilitating condition. And all we need truly is not that much money, and we're hoping to be able to raise it as soon as possible, hopefully within the next month, so that we can pull the trigger on all of these approaches and reach our goal as soon as possible. Because for the people who are living with this challenge, every day is a day lost.
So, and I know that, Michelle, your family is personally invested financially. I know our family is, and I urge everyone who's watching today to go on the website and just click donate. Is it as simple as that?
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. And you're doing a good deed, especially those of you who are spiritual, those of you who really believe in Judaism in the month of Elul. Today's the day to do it. Just go on, click. You give to so many things. A coffee costs you $7 today. Instead of the coffee, make a $7 donation if that's all you have. It doesn't matter how little it is or how big of a donation you can make, but you can change lives. I want to be able to see you pick up your child and throw them in the air. I want Joya to be able to go on vacation with her kids, because my sister-in-law can't. She can't take vacations with us because she can't get up and walk into the sand because it's so difficult. And people who don't have a loved one with HIBM don't understand the pain that goes along with it. And I am so incredibly grateful to you gentlemen for really dedicating your lives to finding a cure for HIBM, and all of us in the community need to step up and we need to do our part. Do it today.
Last night I was with a friend of mine, your sister-in-law, Rachel, actually, and she said something that I think that was really important, and she said, this is something extraordinary that we're doing, and every person who donates has a chance to be involved in doing something extraordinary.
That's right.
Every single dime counts.
That's right.
And I thank those people who have donated more than once, and I thank you to all future donors. And this is something that we need a new word for gratitude for, if people get involved.
I mean,
something extraordinary.
Think of the pride, right? That the Iranian Jewish community can put a legitimate gene therapy in the grasp of people that can be then used for other diseases, right? I mean, this is a major ordeal. How often do we get a chance to do something like that as a community?
That's right.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to help. You know, this is something that can be done.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've done all the work. You've set it all up. You have the best scientists working on it. All we need to do is step up financially. That's the easy part.
Just come in and buy the popcorn. That's it.
That's it. But that's the easy part. That's the easy part. So I thank you all for watching. I thank you all for being here, for all the great work you're doing. Michelle, we got your back. We're coming in. We're going to help. And hopefully we are going to get a little bit closer today to finding a cure for HIBM. Thank you all for watching. So that's it.
Are we
All right.
on
Yeah.
live?
Yeah, you're on.
Whatever that means.
Maybe they're on.